All right, give me just a minute here. I'm live on YouTube.
Okay.
You're good to go.
All right. I call to order the City of King City Planning Commission at 9:31. Roll call, please.
Commissioner Paulson,
Present.
Commissioner Bellows,
Present.
Commissioner Manelis,
Present.
Commissioner Casanova.
Present.
It is Casanova, right?
It is.
All right. Commissioner Walters. Commissioner Walters, not here. All right.
It looks like he got bumped. Oh, he's there. Let me ask him to unmute.
Sean, we can't hear you. You're muted. I see you now. And Chair Petrie.
Present.
Okay, I pushed the unmute button.
Okay, we can hear you now.
All right, so we'll proceed. So ladies and gentlemen, one of the matters before the Planning Commission today will be dealt with as a public hearing to make recommendations to the City Council. Scheduled public hearings are itemized on the agenda. I will identify the subject, announce when the public hearing is open, and request anyone interested to state their feelings regarding the matter being considered. Failure to raise an issue in person or by letter to the Planning Commission or the City Council precludes raising that issue at a subsequent time on appeal. You may also name and address any other approval criteria you think apply to this decision. If you wish to speak for, against, or comment in any way, when I call for testimony, please identify yourself as wishing to speak. You can do this by raising your hand or typing your name in the chat box. When called to speak, give your name, address, and make your statement. The maximum time allotted for a testimony shall be 3 minutes for individuals, 15 minutes for applicants and persons representing 4 or more persons, 10 minutes for applicants' rebuttal. If your testimony would be repetitious, but you would like the opportunity to appeal the decision, you must type your name in the chat box or let staff know, and they will type your name in the chat box. Okay, at this point, we will go to the approval of the minutes. Commissioners, do you have any questions or concerns about the minutes of the May 26th, 2021 meeting?
Actually, this is Carol, and I would like to know, I'm noticing that the minutes don't have a lot of detail in them. Is that on purpose?
Yes, they are summarized minutes. We do not as a city do like an itemized list of what Portland does. There is no need to have it word for word.
Okay.
Yeah, as long as we're catching the true statements that are made in this, then we're golden.
Thank
Ronnie,
you.
isn't it true that you also have the tapes of these meetings too?
Yes, we have audio recordings, we have video on YouTube. So yeah, these videos are, somebody really wants to know exactly what you said, they can find out pretty easily.
Thank you.
Are there any more additional comments or questions concerning the minutes of the May 26th meeting? Okay, I will entertain a motion to approve the minutes of the May 26th, 2021 meeting.
I move to approve the minutes of the May 26th meeting.
Okay, thank you. Is there a second?
I'll second it.
Second, John Walters. Okay, is there any more discussion? All right, let's go to a vote. We can just do a hand vote. All those in favor of approving the minutes?
Got 6-0. So
Great, great, thank you. All right, so next order of business, I would like to call to order the public hearing regarding case number LU 2021-01 at 9:36. All right, this case number LU 2021-01 concerns House Bill 2001 amendments to the King City Community Development Code and Comprehensive Plan. Do any members of the Planning Commission wish to declare a potential or actual conflict of interest or bias? Okay, seeing none, we move on. Does any member of the Planning Commission wish to report any ex parte contacts? I see none. Does any member of the audience wish to challenge the jurisdiction of the Planning Commission to conduct this hearing? Do you see anything, any comments, Ronnie?
I do not.
Okay. Does anyone in the audience wish to challenge the participation of any member of this commission regarding conflicts of interest, ex parte communication, or prejudgment of this matter? I don't see anything. Does any party have any questions about the procedure? Okay, all right. At this time, I now call for testimony.
I think we start off with the staff report,
Okay,
and then we go into proponents and then opponents, and then staff rebuttal, and then to the council or commission for discussion, right?
Yeah, so I think in this case, we'll start with Herbstworks presentation.
Right.
okay, great.
Okay, good morning, everybody. I'm Marcy McAnally with Herbstworks, and I'm going to make a presentation going through your packet material. So I'm going to share my screen. Please let me know if you can see this document.
Mhm.
Okay. So I'm not making a presentation that's separate from the staff report or from the from the document that we provided in your packet. I'm going to just walk you through that page by page. We have met with you several times over the course of the spring, late winter, spring, to review these amendments that are being made to your development code. Herbstworks work is being funded by a grant from the DLCD. And the goal of the project is to update your development code so that it complies with House Bill 2001, which was passed by the Oregon legislature last year and is requiring all cities in Oregon over a certain size to allow duplexes on every lot, and then some higher order housing on other lots depending on lot size. This is called the Middle Housing Bill, and it will update cities' codes so that they allow a wider range of housing options, from duplexes to triplexes, quadplexes, cottage clusters, and townhouses. So the extent of the area that this zoning change applies to is shown in this map. It is mostly going to affect the Kingston Terrace area, the future area, but it will also apply to historic King City. And that's actually the focus of the amendments in your packet today, are the ones that apply to historic King City. And I'll explain why we think their effect on the historic area will be somewhat minimal in a couple of pages. This is just a little calendar to remind you of the times that we've met with you and the stages that we've been through in this project. We conducted a code audit in December and presented that to you in January. And then we provided kind of a starting memo about what the amendments would consist of. We refined those amendments and described them to you in March or May, April, somewhere in there. And today we're having a public hearing on the final proposed amendments. As you recall, we discussed with you a larger reorganization of your zoning code that might make it easier to use. That goes above and beyond the House bill requirements, but it was judged by you to be kind of a helpful step. So what we did was we elected to reorganize the zoning districts to group residential zones and use tables to present the standards. This will renumber some sections of your code, basically all the single dwelling, or I should say, sorry, residential, single use residential zones. It will cluster those together into a single chapter, and we'll use tables to represent the permitted uses, and also a separate table to represent the standards, and you'll be able to see them side by side and compare them. And right now your zoning code goes chapter by chapter. It uses a table in some areas, it uses a list format in others. This will make it easier to use. Able to represent. This is a little picture of what how some of the chapters will be consolidated. I actually realized that I'm going through an older presentation. I'm sorry. The calendar is still the same, but in your packet, I'm actually talking at this point about the existing King City vacant land. This goes back to what I said a couple of minutes ago about why we think the effect of these zoning code amendments will be somewhat minimal in existing King City, and that's because vacant property is very rare. It's these, in this map, it's the red outlined areas. And I forgot to mention, although I have mentioned it in previous sessions with you, that your zoning code, compared with many other cities in Oregon, is already very middle housing friendly. The lots tend to be small in historic King City. Housing that is attached is common. And so we're really talking about some minor tweaks to the code that will help it comply. In terms of the physical form that will result, probably be very similar to what you see in historic King City today. I mentioned that the area where we're likely to see the greatest effect through these code amendments is going to be in the Kingston Terrace Master Plan area. And the code amendments, or I should say the new code for that area, will be developed in conjunction with the master plan that's happening, continuing to happen this year. And what I have on this page is a picture from the concept plan that was prepared in 2018, where we talked about, or we promoted the vision for King City, King City's housing in this area as being very middle housing. Like this was before, this presaged the House Bill 2001, so you were kind of ahead of things philosophically. And it talks quite a bit about mixing incomes, mixing housing types, providing a wider range of housing choices, not just in kind of a district by district basis, but actually on a lot by lot basis. And we talked quite a bit in the concept plan about ways to plat and lay out blocks and zone. So that provides a lot of the direction that we'll be implementing in code, new zoning code for this area, and it will be very consistent with the House Bill 2001. So there is a simple table in the very beginning of the multi-page document, starts on page 6, that goes through the amendment types. Chapter by chapter, describes in a summary form what we're providing in each chapter. I think I'll go through this with you just briefly. I'm not going to go through the actual track change documents section though. I'll stop and let Keith take over at that point. So in section 16.24, we're amending residential use definitions to include these additional housing types that I mentioned earlier. In 684 through 16100, we'll be combining, I'm sorry, that's supposed to be 1684 through 16100. We'll be combining the provisions for your R9, SF, AT, R12, R15, and R24 districts into one overall residential zoning chapter with a reorganized and amended set of development and design standards. And you can see that table in the track change edits. It will cause these sections to be renumbered. We're amending the zoning classification districts table to reflect this new form-based approach ordering that we talked about. We're putting the SF and the AT zones over to the far right. Those are historic zones. The newer zones, the R9, 12, 15, and 24 will be organized side by side, and they represent kind of a graduated density from left to right. It'll be easier to understand the form intuitively by looking at the table in the way that it's been reorganized. In 16.84, we're amending the section to contain all the purpose statements for the 6 single dwelling residential zones. No amendments are being proposed for the purpose statements. We're adding a new table, housing types permitted by single use residential zone, and that's to clarify that housing types are not land uses. Right now, you have the housing types. Not all of the House Bill required housing types are represented, but where you do represent a middle housing type like duplex, you're listing that along with uses such as an institutional use. And that isn't really very clear. So what we're going to do is take the housing types, which is a construction type or a residential structure type, out of the use category and place it into its own separate table and make it very clear in which zones each housing type is permitted. And we're adding a new table that's the dimensional and density requirements for single-use residential zones. That's going to be organized in the same way that I described above, with the R9 through 24 side by side and the AT and the SF set separately, or I'm sorry, not separate, but to the far right. We have supporting amendments for consistency kind of throughout here. Another major section of change is the parking and loading. We're mostly advocating here that you change your residential, you change the standards, the access standards, so that they apply to middle housing up to 6 units, because right now the threshold for sort of right-sized parking standards is under 6, and you're likely to see middle housing that's up to 6. I guess an easier way to describe this is that apartment requirements for parking lot design should not be applied to middle housing. We do need to clarify density maximums in these areas because the House Bill doesn't allow density maximums to apply to certain housing types. But we intend to clarify the density minimums and set up a system that's clear on density overall for the Kingston Terrace area. I think that's it for the summary. So if I could turn it back to Keith. to talk about DLCD's comments and next steps.
Did receive some comments from the Department of Land Conservation and Development staff just late yesterday. They seem to be pretty satisfied with the amendments overall. They really had some relatively minor comments that I think we can look at some more. One was they felt that the AT zone, we should have different standards for townhouses versus apartments. I responded to them indicating that we've had these standards in place for years and everybody seemed to be able to get along okay. And though that zone is essentially 100% developed, so maybe that wasn't much of an issue for the existing area, but that we might take a look at how we deal with development standards for the new developing areas, that we may want some development standards for a house, like an attached or a row house type of development versus an apartment building, so that you don't have one size fit standards that don't really work well for one housing type versus another. So we can certainly look at that as we go forward. And then another one thing is we have one section that Marcy has for amendment, and it was just really to note the different housing types and how they apply to access standards. And we have a standard that says that for a single family house, you have to have a minimum of one driveway. And they thought, well, do you mean maximum? And I said, well, actually, it is minimum. And I think that standard we could take a look at again also, because it really comes out of the era when we're visualizing neighborhoods really being mostly single driveway and a garage and so forth. So, and you might have a circular driveway or something and have two driveway access points onto a street. So we'll have to take a look at that, particularly because some of these housing types may not even require any on-site parking. So anyway, we'll have to take a look at that one too as we go forward. I think important with this hearing today is we needed to get to this point and also to have one with the City Council next week to just review where we are with this. We are not required to adopt anything at this point, and honestly, we're going to be looking more at our zoning code and how we deal with residential types as we go through the master plan process here over the next 6 to 9 months. So, at least I'm looking at this as a good start, a lot of really good raw material that we will continue to work with before we come up with a complete code amendment package for the Planning Commission and City Council to consider for adoption. As far as our requirement or obligation with the state are concerned, we simply need to get these House Bill 2001 related amendments adopted by June of next year. So we have time to think about this some more and so forth. And this hearing was mainly to get us to a point where we really have a package together that we can talk about and consider, but we're not looking for any particular action from the Planning Commission today. Now, if you do have comments, thoughts, recommendations about what we should be doing next, please make those comments, but we're not really looking for a formal recommendation to either approve or not approve these amendments today. So I think Marcy and I'd be happy to entertain any questions you might have.
Carol, you're on mute.
Thanks. I still have questions about the setbacks. I was thinking, and whether they will, when and whether they will be amended. It occurs to me that, historic King City was all one stories for the most part, and so setbacks don't have to be huge. But if we have a 10-foot setback in the yards, that's less than an alley would be. And so I really would, I'm thinking that maybe setbacks might be tied to the height of buildings. I was thinking about that this week. And that's just my comment.
So are you thinking really based on experience from, say, West King City area and how that's turned out with the setback requirements there, and that when we get to Kingston Terrace, we should revisit how we deal with setbacks?
Yes.
Okay. I would say and look at
Hey, Keith, you're breaking,
and
Keith, you're breaking up really bad. You have low broadband.
yeah. Any better now, or?
It's a little bit better.
Okay. Yeah, I just got some note that it was unstable. I don't know why. Usually it's fine, but
What was your comment? I didn't hear it. It broke up.
all right, let's see if this works better this time. Can you hear me now?
Yeah.
Okay. I think it's definitely our intent to take a look at design requirements, setbacks, and so forth, as we look at what types of neighborhoods and building types we are going to have in the Kingston Terrace area. And we certainly take another look, particularly this relationship between building height and the setbacks that you have. We can certainly take a look at those types of things as we go forward with the master plan. And those can be reflected in either some of our existing zones that we have that we might apply, say the R9 zone and the R12 zone in Kingston, come up with some districts that are different as far as their design approach.
I have a comment to make. I want to make a reference to Article 4 with regards to the density calculations. So we go about sort of stipulating the minimum requirements, but we don't have a maximum. I'm really concerned about that, because all of a sudden you're going to have the sort of, like the density could really explode. I mean, you anticipate there's going to be something, and all of a sudden someone's going to build a triplex like next door, and the density is going to be like, really like dramatically increased.
Well, I can try to respond to that. Commissioner Casanova, do I have your name right? The purpose of the House bill and the middle housing legislation is to encourage things like triplexes, but in the shape of a kind of historic or traditional house. So the setbacks and the height will stay the same. But yes, it's true that there may be 3 dwellings in what looks like a single dwelling home. That's kind of the point. And there's not really any way to get around that. I mean, that's the purpose of the legislation, but the form will limit, to some extent, the form will limit the amount of density that's permitted on any lot. You probably, in some of these small lots that exist in King City historically, you will not be able to build a triplex, even if it might be a permitted use there, just because the lot size is so small and or parking can't be provided, or you can't meet the setbacks and the height. So there's a certain self-limiting factor within the physical development standards. When we get to Kingston Terrace area, though, I think you may see more units on a single lot than you would see in a typical suburban neighborhood. And that will actually be a good thing, because the goal here is to provide more housing choices and more affordability. It doesn't prohibit someone from building a single dwelling home detached on a lot, but they would have the option to provide 3 dwelling units, attached or detached on that lot, as long as they stay within the height and the setbacks.
Okay, again, I'm just concerned in terms of like the development. So, you know, like someone will go there with the intention of having a duplex, and all of a sudden becomes a triplex or like a quadruplex, and all they're really wanting to is to really get the return for the square footage of housing which can be sold. So that's my concern. So whereas if we had to sort of stipulate the minimum requirements and maybe a range of what the maximum ought to be, that they would probably sort of control that to a certain extent.
And the House bill doesn't allow us to apply a maximum zoning cap to certain housing types. But I'm an architect and urban designer, and we've been working with these housing types a lot in other cities, and we've done a lot of testing of these densities and forms, and there really is a limit. I mean, the maximum is set by the physical capacity of the site, the development capacity of the site. And I certainly hear your concern quite a bit, but I myself am not seeing evidence of reasons to be concerned.
Okay.
I think another piece that will control density is the types of housing that you allow in a particular zone. So with House Bill 2001, we're essentially required to allow up to a fourplex, but we don't have to allow an apartment building or a multifamily building unless it's more of a multifamily zone. So you do reach, just like Marcy's saying, you really can do with those housing types and with the dimensional and design requirements that will limit, but it's harder to come up with just a specific number. So this does represent a departure from how we've been asked to do planning before. When we did the planning for West King City, we had to meet a density target. So we had an average density for the West King City area of 10 units per acre. And the lowest we could go was 80% of the maximum.
Mm-hmm.
So this is a difference. And we'll be talking more about how to set the minimum. So for example, right now, the R9 zone allows for a maximum of 9 units per acre, and it requires a minimum of 7.2 units per acre, 80%. So may still have a minimum that's similar or maybe even the same as what we require. We might still require, but we wouldn't have the maximum any longer. We would be relying on the development standards and those sorts of things that would be the limiter as to how many homes you could have. So maybe you could get up to 11 or 12. You probably wouldn't be able to go really, particularly if you're talking about just some infill and a change lot in that lot, because these areas are all developed. Thinking more, obviously for Kingston Terrace, we'll be looking at that differently because it's going to be a clean slate, and their higher densities would be possible. But then if we plan, we have the infrastructure for them, then it should all work out.
Thank you, Keith.
I have a question for Keith, please. Sorry, I didn't put my video. Okay. Keith, when you talk about units per acre, are you talking about buildings? Or we talked a little bit about divorcing dwelling units from the number of buildings. And when Marcy talked, she said that there would be probably per building on a piece of land a maximum of dwelling units. So how have we come up with a way to kind of divorce dwelling units from units per acre?
Well, that's a good question. I mean, historically, we've been going mostly with the idea, particularly with subdivisions, one lot equals one unit. And that's how we've been calculating the density. Typically, also like in West King City, most of the developers had just met the minimum density. So there was still room to have more. So even if somebody decided to put a duplex on a few lots, they'd still wouldn't bumping up against the maximum density, the way we've had it constructed so far. You're seeing a trend, though, that now there's an interest in getting closer to the maximum density, Ponderosa Pines being an example, where there we're as we have it in our code today. So I think that the difference here would be is that we wouldn't be worried as much about the number of the maximum density anymore, as the state is requiring as construct this. So we still have some more conversation as to how we want to deal with the density, whether we want to have a minimum. And then particularly for Kingston Terrace, Marcy, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think we have to plan for up to 20 units an acre on the net and on average, and that may be less. And it may be that it won't occur. We have to at least plan to accommodate that much. Marcy, do you have something to add on that part of it?
You just, the language is that you have to plan to provide infrastructure for 20 dwelling units per acre. And so I believe I've heard that the DLCD stance on that is that if a city is going to do that, then they're probably going to zone for 20 dwelling units per acre. But again, that's an average. And we've talked about in Kingston Terrace, there being different areas with different densities, but an overall average of 20 dwelling units per acre. Could I weigh in just a bit on Carol, on Commissioner Bellows' question that I think there may be some confusion between what's a structure, a residential structure, and what's a dwelling unit. And in the King City definition that you had pre this project, it's very flexible on dwelling units, how they're attached or detached. They can be attached like an up and down dwelling, or they can be attached like side by side on the same lot. So we've intended to keep that. We added the language that they could also be detached because that wasn't clear. Now this could mean that today where you have a duplex that's up and down or attached on its side, that you could in the future have a duplex that's two separate structures on a lot. We thought, and we had discussions about this earlier, and people I think were generally friendly toward the idea of offering more flexibility. So it's possible there would be two residential structures on a lot, but they cannot exceed the development capacity that's provided by the zoning. They still have to meet the height. They still have to meet the perimeter setbacks.
I guess that
Marcy,
I'm sorry. I guess that my confusion is that, okay, I live in an R7, and my house can be subdivided into 3 apartments, I figured out. And if everyone in my neighborhood did that, then am I living in an R21 or am I living in an R7? And I know I've in my plan, the little bit of planning career that I had has sat for hours and hours and hours with the head of the planning department, trying to figure out what a code meant. And 15 years down the line, we're not going to be there to tell them. So that's, I guess, where I'm going. When we're talking about density, are we talking about the density of the buildings? Are we talking about the density of the people in the buildings? How can we really make it clear kind of what the intention is? Number of families, number of buildings, what's important. And you can just chew on that.
That may be something we all have to chew on together, because this is a kind of radical departure from the single dwelling zoning I do want to say that the single dwelling zoning that we're talking about that categorizes R5, R9, R12, that's a 75-year-old construction. It's not before that happened, before this was a single dwelling zoning came into prominence after World War II. It was extremely subsidized by the federal government. It really benefited certain people and incomes and class and race. And but it's a relatively new phenomenon. And in essence, what we're doing with the middle housing is going back to the way it was before. It was much more common to see a mix of housing types in cities where there were duplexes and triplexes and quadplexes next to single dwelling detached homes. And even there were, in some neighborhoods, there would be apartment buildings blended in, very much blended neighborhoods. And that's what we're going back to. But does require kind of, in a way, having to rethink the terminology of the past 75 years.
Marcy and Keith, I have a couple of questions here. One is from Mike Meyer and I'm sorry, Michael Meyer. When densities are calculated, is it for every acre or the overall area zone for say R9?
Currently, we're calculating on the acreage that's available for development. So if you have a property that has right of way, you would subtract that. If it has some unbuildable area like floodplain, you would subtract that. So you're dealing with more of a sort of a net acreage. Now, our way of calculating acreage does include, so say if you're doing a subdivision and you have to put in a street to serve the lots, that's included in your density calculation. So it's, but as we've been saying, the importance of density is going to be diminished with House Bill 2000, and it's really going to be more about different housing types and maybe sticking to some sort of a range that's not as tightly regulated or I'd say, Marcy, I see what Marcy has to say, but I think it could be safe to say that we're going to rely more on good design outcomes and less about meeting a number for a particular density requirement. So we'll get these things to fit properly and work well within a neighborhood and not so much about the density itself.
Maybe I could give a little illustration of how this might work out on a site. Say you have a lot in the new Kingston Terrace area that's about 7,000 square feet. And it would be under this new middle housing rule allowed to have a triplex on it, a quadplex on it, a townhouse on it. The townhouse would have to meet land division standards. So that's, it would take a little bit more to get a townhouse, but, and it would be able to accommodate a cottage cluster, which is a type of development of small 900 square foot footprint cottages arranged around shared open space. There are kind of some prescriptive rules around how that's laid out, but there could be more than 4 units if you did a cottage cluster. And the way that the legislation, I think some of the benefits of allowing this kind of range of housing types and also allowing them to be attached or detached or stacked or separated or a combination of that is that you can do things like respond to topography much better. You could save some trees on site, but you're still going to be limited to the amount of development capacity that's allowed to you by the setbacks and the height. That's still your maximum capacity. You can just mix it up in different ways. You can provide different forms of housing. But there are some benefits to being able to respond to the natural context, for one thing, saving trees, for example, or avoiding sloped areas.
And Matt, I want to recognize your comment there, but I'm going to save that comment for the testimony when that is opened.
Okay, so at this point, is there additional staff reporting or staff comments before we go to testimony?
I don't think so.
Okay, so are we ready to go to public testimony at this time?
I believe so.
Okay. All right, we will, I'll call for testimony and we'll start with people that would like to speak for this proposal.
I'm going to start out with Matt Wellner. Hopefully I'm saying his last name right. His comment is the flexibility to allow detached middle housing in lieu of an attached duplex is a big plus.
Well, and I guess, do you want me to speak to that too a little bit?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay. So my background is real estate. I do land development. I sit on the Washington County Planning Commission, have for a number of years. Have participated in planning activities in North Bethany and Bull Mountain and Cooper Mountain, and kind of in the mix with a lot of these planning projects like this. And I'm excited about the possibilities of what House Bill 2001 are going to create for our industry and for our ability to provide something that's an affordable product, because obviously the way we're doing it is not resulting in that. When HB 2001 first came out, my concern about it was that it was going to result in investor housing. It was going to invest in duplexes, triplexes, and fourplexes that didn't create any opportunities for home ownership. And there is actually, I didn't hear all the staff report, but there's a SB 458 that has gone through this session that is going to create opportunities for dividing those units into individual fee simple parcels, which will go a long ways to helping make sure that we're not just creating rental housing, we're creating housing that can be purchased and creating opportunities for people that don't have that entrance into a first-time home buyer home to purchase something and build equity and get into the next home beyond that. So my comment with regards to being able to do it in the detached form, City of St. Helens, their version of HB 2001 basically said they only had to address the duplex piece, but they did it in a manner that said it can be done as an attached duplex or as two detached single family homes. And a duplex unit on its own, a triplex, a fourplex, just the attached structure itself has costs that a single family detached house doesn't have. You have exterior maintenance costs. A lot of times you can't even maintain your own outdoor your exterior landscaping. Although it may be less expensive to purchase a duplex unit, ultimately there's other costs associated with owning something that's attached that can make having a detached single family fee simple home on par fiscally. So it's I think that ultimately the best outcome is that we are living in a more dense environment, yes, but that as much as possible it can be a detached product, because I think that's what's more desirable for the lender, for the homeowner, for the insurer, so on and so forth. So thank you for your time.
Thank you. Ronnie, do we see any more hands raised to speak for the proposal?
I don't see any hands at this moment. Asking for anybody to raise your hands. electronically, screen wise. Anyway. I do have a comment from Jan. How does this affect tax lots? So
I will,
I don't know if it really affects tax lots. And so one thing to be clear on, a tax lot often coincides with a legally divided, created parcel, but not necessarily, because just as the title implies, these lots are created primarily for tax purposes. So sometimes you can have a separate tax lot, but not a legally separate parcel you can build on. But I don't see that this would affect tax lots. A subdivision, for example, you would have tax lots and legally separate parcels that would be one and the same. So I don't really think it would affect tax lots. Now, maybe I'm misunderstanding the intent of the question if they want to ask something different.
We should also probably stick to the script here. We're still on proponents.
Yeah.
So, just a reminder, this is a public hearing and that we are shooting. I sent Keith and Marcy a question because I was a little taken aback by your comment earlier that we're not looking for a recommendation. I had thought we were here to get a recommendation and present to the planning commission so that we could move this forward to city council. Am I wrong in that, or what's going on?
I think you're correct that we'd like planning commission to weigh in so city council can benefit from that. But Keith is also right that you don't have to adopt, this does not have to be adopted until later.
Right.
All right. Ronnie, are we seeing any more testimony for this proposal?
For
All right.
opponents. Now we have to ask opponents.
Yes, exactly. So now we're looking for any folks that would like to speak against this proposal. All right. So not seeing any, so we will now
Not
take
hearing any.
general. All right, got someone?
No, not hearing
Okay.
anyone.
All right, let's go for people that would like to just make general comments about this. Not seeing anything?
Nothing.
Okay.
So
So,
at this time, Chair Petrie, what you can do is close the public testimony.
right,
Public hearing is thereby closed and the planning commission can debate.
exactly. So seeing that there is no additional testimony, at this time, I would ask for a motion from the commission to either close or continue the public hearing. Is there a motion?
I will make a motion to close the public hearing.
Okay, we have a motion from Anne to close the public hearing. Is there a second?
I second it.
Second from Carol. Is there any discussion? Okay, I call for a roll call vote to close this public hearing.
I can do that.
Commissioner Paulson, Commissioner Walters, Commissioner Casanova, Commissioner Bellows, Commissioner Manelis, and did I miss anyone? Commissioner Walters, I see you, and Commissioner Petrie, I see you too. So that'd be 6 in favor. Closing.
All right. So this public hearing is now closed at 10:24. So now it's up to the planning commission. What's your pleasure? Do you wish to recommend to the city council as is with conditions or not recommend? We can have any discussion that you'd like to have about that. Do any of the commissioners have any comments?
Yeah, I do always.
Commissioner Bellows.
I don't feel that we have anything really solid to recommend at this point. I think there's a lot of questions, I brought up questions that we have. And so I don't see I don't see some specifics in what we're recommending in order to just say, hey, adopt this right now. And if I'm wrong, please, Marcy, I mean, Ms. McAnally and Mr. Lydon, please let us know. Because I find it very vague at this point.
Okay,
I would suggest that maybe one possible way to look at this would be to recommend that the city council consider it, and then maybe note some of the parts that you feel need more work or more clarification in particular. Maybe that would be a helpful way to go at this point, since, like we said, this is really work in progress and we're not looking to adopt anything right now, but over, as we go through the master plan and so forth. So maybe if you just listed some of your concerns or things that you think need more clarification, that would be really helpful as we go forward.
And if I could add a suggestion, that it would also help us to understand where your concerns about how this applies to historic King City might differ from those concerns you have about the way that it would apply to Kingston Terrace.
Okay, I just wanted to let you know, I really like the form that you've developed, Marcy. But I haven't, and I looked at your example charts, and they're great, but I didn't see any specifics for King City at this point. And that's what I'm talking about. I don't see the specific, things like setbacks and at this point, I guess I'm not sure what we are sending forth, whether we're sending forth a completed code, which, Keith said that we are all in, it's a work in progress still. So I'm going to say I like the form, but there's still lots and lots of specifics to fill in the blanks.
I'd just like to chime in really quick too, if I may.
go ahead.
What we have in front of us essentially takes a look at our code, performs an audit, and identifies which areas of the code need to be modified in order to get us into compliance with House Bill 2001, 2003. And those are listed in the staff report that Marcy has provided, unless I'm mistaken. But those are the changes that we need to do to be in compliance with House Bill 2001 and 2003. Now, granted, we don't necessarily have to adopt this until next June or so, but we still have done all the work that we need to do to amend the code so that we're in compliance. And as Keith was saying earlier, we are still going to have to go through master planning. We're still going to have to do code updates, master plan updates, and all that jazz later on in the year. So whether we incorporate these changes now or we incorporate them later is irrelevant to me. I see this as this is what we have to do in order to comply with the law. So we're looking for a recommendation from the Planning Commission to move this forward so that we can get it before the city council and at least get it going so that we're in compliance. Am I missing something, Keith? Isn't that our primary goal here?
Well, I think so. I think the main concern I would have is if we adopt something now and then finish the master planning work, we would probably be going back to change some of these things that were as a result of the master plan, what comes out of that. So I would think that since we do have the time, that we should hold off on officially adopting House Bill 2001 changes and then having to come back and revisit and tinker with them again here in just a few months.
All right, I understand that, but we have a process that we have to follow in order to be in compliance. And we've already submitted our DLCD notice for Form 1. We've identified our hearing date. This is the public hearing for this code amendment. So we need to move forward with this code right now in accordance with DLCD guidelines, right? And then once that's adopted, if we need to revisit it in the master plan, we can redo that in a different process. I'm trying to make sure that this is a clear process that we're doing right now. And I'm a little confused at the beginning of this on why we're trying to push it out when we're just conducted the public hearing. Now we've closed the public hearing and we have the documentation in front of us that we need to make the amendments to the code that we need to do.
Yeah, we could certainly do that. But we're not obligated to adopt. We're just obligated to have this hearing today and the one with the city council. And then if council decides it wants to continue
Right.
to another date for whatever reason, then that would be what they can do.
I agree. The city
And
council.
perhaps we go,
Yeah, so what we have to do
Sure.
today, in
And-
order to have the hearing before the city council, is we have to have a recommendation today. Per our legislative requirements, we have to have a planning commission recommendation to take to the
Right.
city council, so the city council can review the matter.
I make a motion
Right.
to move this to the city council. What's the language I use?
What's that now?
I make a motion to move this document to the city council.
So you would recommend approval of this document to the city council. All right, so the motion is made from Commissioner Paulson.
All right. I'll second that motion.
May I ask for a clarification? This wouldn't change the motion. It's just a clarification, I think, from Commissioner Bellows, that I think I heard you say that the standards are not specific enough to give you comfort. And so I want to clarify that the standards that are in the document apply. Those are literally the standards that currently apply. They are not changing. They're just restructured into a table. They don't apply to Kingston Terrace. So I'm not sure if that's what you're uncomfortable about, is that there aren't standards yet for the Kingston Terrace area.
Thank you. That really helped me.
Okay.
So I was just going to say that the word adopt is not exactly what we're doing. What we're doing is where the motion is to recommend these amendments to our code and to recommend these amendments to the city council for consideration. So that's really what we're talking about here. We're not changing the code. We're not doing any of the detailed kinds of things. This is a big picture, making us in compliance with House Bill 2001. And that's what it's really about. So that's what Commissioner Paulson's motion is. And that's what we're talking about right at the moment. So is there any more discussion concerning this motion? Any other comments on this motion? Okay, then I call for a vote. The motion is to recommend these amendments to City Council.
City recorder request roll call, please.
Yeah, okay, so
Yes.
just for clarification, I want to make sure I have the verbiage of the motion. So we are recommending approval of the code amendments proposed in this report by Herbsworks to the city council for consideration.
Correct.
All right, Ronnie, did you get that?
I did.
Okay. That being said, we have a motion and a second. I have Commissioner Paulson recommending approval and Commissioner Petrie seconding that motion. All those in favor, I'll move through individually.
I agree.
Councilor Paulson,
Yes.
Councilor Casanova,
I agree.
Commissioner Walters,
I agree.
Commissioner Bellows,
Yes.
Commissioner Manelis,
Yes, I agree.
and Commissioner Petrie.
Yes.
That's a unanimous vote to recommend approval of the code amendments proposed by Herbsworks to the city council for consideration.
Great, thanks. And unanimous then. So case LU 2021-01 will be recommended to the city council on their June 16th, 2021 meeting at 5:30.
Thank you. Or it's June 16th, I think, right?
Right, June 16th, yeah.
Yep, good.
All right, so are there any additional staff reports?
I have nothing more to report other than we have a tabling event this evening at the King City Community Park. We will have our TSP team and I believe our master plan team there to be engaging with the public that are down at the park and also anyone interested in coming. We've sent out flyers to alert everyone that this event is taking place from 4 to 6 this afternoon and encourage everyone to come down and let us know your thoughts and items that you'd like us to consider as we look at the master planning efforts and the TSP efforts. So. Oh, also, just while we're on, I'll just kind of mention, we have the community art project that is happening on June 17th and 18th. And then we also have June 22nd for the final piece of the community art project. That's the 2 walls that we put down there. We're going to be doing a mosaic inside that. We also have been invited by Mr. Russell, who I believe is on this call. Yeah, I see Mr. Russell. He's invited us to do a site tour on June 21st at 10 a.m. of the expansion areas and the residents down there.
How is that going to work, Mike? Are we carpooling or?
I would bring some hiking boots. Maybe we can, park at the King City Community Park and then maybe shuttle over from that location. So that way we don't overload River Lane with parking. There is some parking at the end of River Lane, but it's not a lot. So if we have, 20 cars coming down there, it might overload it a bit. So I would recommend we all meet up at the community park, King City Community Park, and then maybe carpool around.
Okay, that sounds great. All right, do any of the commissioners have any reports for today?
Not.
No? All right, well then, at this point, if there is no further business for the commission, I would entertain a motion to adjourn.
I
I
move,
motion.
go ahead, Carol.
I move that we adjourn.
I'll second it.
Okay, it's been
Was
moved
the
and
second?
seconded that we adjourn. That was the second by John Walter.
Okay.
So,
He's got a question. Mark's got a question.
good discussion. Mark, no?
No, I was just raising my hand to.
All right, so it's been moved and seconded that we now adjourn this meeting. All those commissioners, please raise your hand if you're in favor of adjourning at this time.
I've got 6 raised hands that I see on my.
Okay,
So.
well, this planning commission meeting is now adjourned at 10:39. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you,
Thank you,
everyone.
Lori.
Thank you all.
Thanks,
Have a
everyone.
good day.